Hey everyone, thanks for participating in this Facebook question and answer thing. I hope it works out nice. I left the post up for one day and got a lot of questions as well as a lot of jokes and banter from my friends, but that's all great. So the questions, I think, pretty much go into three categories. There's a bunch about, four categories. There's a few about technique and warm-up and things like that. And then there's a few about my new mallet series, which is fine because I haven't talked about those yet. And then there's a few about composition and like creativity. And then there's also just kind of miscellaneous ones. And I think we will be able to get to everything. So first thing I think I'd like to answer is from Paul Millette, or Paul Milletti, sorry, in North Dakota, and he wants to know what was my snare drum practice routine like in my undergrad. And I'm really glad you asked this, Paul, because I think it's an important distinction to say how a person practices when they're, out of their training years, and of course we're always in training, I'm still in training, but out of their fundamental years and how they warm up or what their routine was back when they were training. So I think I was a pretty traditional person. I grew up with the standards. I grew up with stick control. I love accents and rebounds. A lot of people don't get to accents and rebounds because you can deal with stick control like forever, but accents and rebounds is really hard, and I think it's really, really good. So even if you haven't like graduated from stick control yet, if you want to call it that, I think you never really graduate from stick control, but do them both at the same time. I think it's a good idea. I think my teacher put me into accents and rebounds long before I was through the stick control book. Another one I really like, which I kind of feel like is roughly a combination of the two, is the Joe Morello book, the Master Studies book. This book is really cool. I think it's not as systematic as the other two. It's kind of just like good things you should do for your hands, and they're not as systematic as the others, but they're just fantastic. So the Joe Morello book, and one you might not know about is Dave Tuff's Advanced Paradiddle Exercises. This book is really cool. Unfortunately, it's out of print, so if you can ever find a copy of this thing, I really recommend you pick it up. So it's amazing. It's just paradiddle. Let's see, what is it? It's three forms of paradiddle: single, double, and triple paradiddle, and that's it. The whole book is based off those three things. And I think that's really cool because I really do believe all the fancy things you can do with sticks really break down to just control of height and singles and doubles. Like there isn't any single rudiment or hybrid rudiment that you can't break down to just control of tap and bounce. So I think it's really neat he made this whole book based off of those simple things. So along with always working out of those books steadily and like just with weekly assignments, I would also create my own exercises based on whatever challenges I happen to be doing. And my teacher worked on a lot of rudimental solos with me. So the Jay Wanamaker book when I was younger, and then the Mitch Markovich solos when I was older, and then like the Phantom Fire pieces. And he always just had this great way of writing a little exercise out in the margin, even if it was just like 2 beats long. So, okay, I'm having a problem with this dense flam section or something, and he'd just write this little exercise out to the side. So I would do those exercises the same way you do these types of exercises, just like in a pattern, in some type of template, and just repeat them over and over and over until you were just really, really solid, and you could do them at all sorts of tempos. So I'm going to show you an example of how Key and I might have done that, and I still do this today. It's just take the new challenge, write this little exercise in the margin, and then adapt it into like a stick control type of exercise. So if I was having a problem with flams, a dense flam section in a piece, an exercise we'd write in the margins would be something like this. So you just have flam accents alternating with flam taps, and then the exercise is set up so that you're turned around for left hand lead in the next measure, And then again, just like the books I mentioned, there is a repeat, and the exercise is set up to where you can just do it over and over and over. So of course you begin slow and then gradually speed up. Another possibility, if you're having a hard time coming up with something to play, build off of something in another book. For example, there is the Progressive Steps to Syncopation book by Ted Reed, and you could take, say, the first 16-bar exercise, and instead of just playing the quarter notes that are written, play the challenging thing you're working on. So let's say we're working on flam taps again. In place of those quarter notes that are written, we will just play flam taps. You could also overlay more complex figures. So let's say you're working on this figure and you need to, again, generate some random exercise. Take the same 16-bar exercise from the Reed book and just put that figure in place of every quarter note, and then just keep 16th notes running in between. So basically the book is just generating where you're going to put the challenge. So that would be something like this. Okay, so Richard McGuire in Flagstaff, Arizona would like to know also about my practice routine, but also my approach to technique. So with warming up, certainly I either warm up with these same sort of exercises, or I simply play light rep before the heavy rep. So if you have the really, really technical stuff that you're working on, play the light stuff first. Play something that's going to get you in gear for the heavier stuff. Okay, so my general approach to technique, again, is very low, relaxed, loose. I generally play very down into the drum, and I tend to not do extraneous lifting. So anyway, I tend to hold with a 3-point fulcrum, which means the place you're pinching the stick is in the back of your hand. The more common one is probably in the forward fulcrum like this, which is of course great, and I still do use that if you're playing, say, soft snare drum. You need that forward fulcrum. The back fulcrum for something like that is not useful. But generally, and again being very broad, I tend to do this because it allows for movement this way, of course, but it also allows for movement this way. If you're using forward fulcrum, movement this way is restricted because you're pinching in the front, whereas here you're going back and forth. And I think this is really valuable, especially on mallet instruments, when you have multiple targets and you have a lot of places to go, and the instrument is no longer just vertical, but it's also really horizontal. This is really, really important. So that's applicable to drum set, to setup pieces, and of course to mallet instruments. Okay, Cornel in Roeselare, Belgium wants to know, for classical snare drum, what exercises do you play as a daily routine, if any? Everything we just covered is still fair game. I would still do that today, and I do still do that today. Something I'm really interested in right now, and I'm actually trying to work up a series of exercises on, I'm really close to finish, but these shift-click metronome exercises. So this idea where you set the metronome to a click, and then you throw in some type of meter that's going to throw the click into a new location, like a 3/8 measure or 5/8 measure or something like that, and then try to deal with the click on that new rhythmic partial that it's on. So here are a few of these shift-click exercises. I'll play the bass one for you, the most basic one, sort of just demonstrates the concept, and then a few others. Also, Cornel, I'd like to say if you're referring to classical snare drum rep, like say for orchestral excerpts or for auditions or something, I really recommend overemphasizing your soft playing. So something like the Scheherazade excerpt, you may just think, oh, well, I just need to be comfortable with soft doubles or soft singles, however you're sticking it. But I would go a step further. Take a whole De La Cluse etude and play it as soft and as even and as in time as possible. And then even take like a rudimental solo and play it as soft and as quiet and as even as possible. That way, something like Scheherazade or the Prokofiev, it just seems like second nature. It just seems comfortable. It seems easy. Facility is well beyond what that excerpt is demanding. Chandler Brown is asking what type of sticks and mallets do I prefer, and what kind of warm-ups do I like to do, and how long should I warm up before practicing? This is a hard question to answer as far as the warm-ups go, because I think everyone is very, very different, and I don't even feel comfortable telling you to definitely do one thing, because I think this is really something you have to discover about your own body. I discovered long ago that my comfort while playing is more contingent upon what I did the day before than how much I warm up the day of. A lot of pieces I can just play cold and it's no problem, but if I didn't do anything the day before, no way. So I think the safe thing to do, of course, like I said before, play light stuff before heavy stuff. But also, I think you should consider like warming up like all day. Like just play technical exercises all day. Just play things that will strain your stamina all day. And then other days maybe just focus on the rep you're learning or something. But I think it's really important, like an athlete, to kind of stretch your stamina and stretch your strength and really take a long time training your hands. So, on to sticks and mallets. I love my new mallets from Innovative Percussion. I think they're fantastic. I'm using every one of them right now on the road. Since the prototypes came out, I haven't been using anything else. I just love them to death, and I'll talk more about those in a minute with some other questions. Some other things I'm using right now are the Innovative 5A general sticks. I just like these sticks. I'm a lighter stick person, and these just seem to have the right balance where they're not so light that they're hard to control, but they're not so big that they feel cumbersome or overbearing. And I also am a pretty small hands person. I have these really thin wrists, and I have these like long bony fingers, so a lighter, thinner stick is kind of more in line with what I'm doing and more in line with the rep I'm currently playing. Also, I'm using some Innovative Percussion brushes right now for a piece, and those three things pretty much are what are in my stick bag right now. Okay, Stephen in Bethesda, Maryland says, where did you come up with the sounds you wanted to hear from your mallets? Can certain mallets be used for certain solos? I think when someone envisions sound, it just comes from experience and just acquiring preference. And I think it sounds like such a simple thing, acquiring preference, but it's actually really difficult. And a lot of people don't have preference, they just follow what they think they're supposed to like. So it's actually a hard thing to acquire, I think. And I don't know how to say it to you verbally, what those mallets sound like, but it's just the sound I've learned to like and the sound I've learned to appreciate. And of course, they're also so much about the feel and the weight and the balance. That's a really huge thing to me, how they feel in my hands. So, can certain mallets be used for certain solos? Yeah, absolutely. That's sort of the starting point for me. I imagined, okay, what kind of rep do I play? And what kind of rep do I plan on playing in the future? And also, what holes in the choices would I like to fill? So what is it that I think other mallets maybe don't do that I would like to come up with? So those types of things really went into my choices. So the white mallets, for example, I really imagine for pieces that are on the high end of the instrument and contain a lot of speed and require a lot of articulation. And these are certainly the sharpest mallets in the series. They speak really quick, and they're really hard. They're about the hardest type of thing I like to hear. So I envision this for things like Keiko's Prism Rhapsody or my White Knuckle Stroll or something like that, or even a rag on the marimba would work. And then, of course, the bottom mallets, imagine for chorales or something with big, round, heavy sounds. And, okay, let's do Neil McNulty in Randolph, New Jersey. He says, also, I want to know more about your mallets. More specifically, the sounds of each mallets and what I can use them for. I'm in the market, and I just don't know which ones to get. So my more general mallets are the 2s and 3s, certainly. Those are kind of the middle grade register, and I almost always play with graduated mallets. I rarely play with all 4 the same. So I very often play with a 2 in the bottom and 3 2s in the top. So you've got a soft bass sound and then 3 articulate mallets in the top. I think that's a really good general way to do things. Or perhaps a bass mallet in the bottom, 2 middle mallets in the middle, and then a high mallet in the high position. The thing I really wanted to do with these mallets was to get the best that I could out of yarn and the best out of cord. I actually have always liked playing cord on marimba. And of course the problem is you use a cord mallet and you don't get the depth that you'll get with a heavy yarn, but if you use a heavy yarn, you won't get the articulation that you'll get with chord. And a lot of rep on the marimba has you in the low and mid register playing very dense activity, which would favor a chord mallet, but then you lose the substance of the sound. So I'm hoping that my mallets will really do both. They give you this substantial resonance and substantial sound, but also give you some articulation. So there's a total of 6 mallets with 4 graduations. So what that means is there's 4 hardnesses. There's the 4, which is the white, the 3, which is the blue, the purplish, which is the 2, and then the black, which is the 1. And then there's 2 more, which are actually on these, and they're just covered with yarn instead of bamboo silk. So what I was trying to do when we created these mallets is get the best of yarn and the best of cord. So I've really liked cord on the marimba ever since I was young. It's just articulate and it's punchy and it's percussive, and the marimba's a percussive instrument, and so much of the rep is written that way. It's treating it like a percussion instrument. So then again, yarn gives you this awesome, lush, rich, resonant sound that you can crank your subwoofer and it just sounds incredible. So I like that as well, of course, and I was hoping to kind of homogenize the 2 of them. So the bamboo silk is the merge of those 2, and then the yarn, which are what those bottom 2 mallets are covered with, sort of gives you the more traditional squishy sound. So it has the same big bass, but with no attack sound. Kind of gives you a more forgiving attack. So anyway, I really like this usage of bamboo silk because it gives you articulation without losing all the resonance, and also without overbearing articulation that you would get from playing chord on the lower end. Jordan, what are some great ways to build up speed on the marimba? What are some practicing tips for white knuckle stroll and in general? So I think speed, and I do get asked about speed a lot, and I don't think speed is almost the right word for what we think of as speed. I think it's much more about fluency and efficiency, and it's much more about economy of movement and just navigating efficiently. And also, if you look at some, say snare drum rudiments, and you look at one hand at a time, even when the rudiment itself is being played very, very fast, one hand at a time is not really playing anything that fast. So if you take one hand away and just do the pattern, you'll notice, okay, that one hand is not doing anything very rapidly. It's just so in sync with the other hand, and the rudiment comes out as being very fast. So it's more about coordination and synchronicity than it is about straightforward speed, the way we think of speed. I would refer you to a video I made on this, because a lot of people have asked about that piece, Why Knuckle Stroll, and I just want to say it's a really tough piece. I played, almost all the xylophone rags, at least the green xylophone rags, played through so much of the green book, the xylophone book, played lots of two-mallet literature before that piece. It's a really, really tough two-mallet piece. I still struggle with it today, and I have to be really in good shape to pull that piece off well. So if that's any consolation, that's what I think. Okay, Dakota Smith in Bloomington, Indiana says, why did I choose to get a second master's degree instead of a doctorate after your first master's? So I have 2 master's degrees, and I had wanted to start my doctoral degree, but long story short, I pretty much got the second master's in lieu of like a performance diploma. And I don't even know if today I'm ready to go back and do a doctorate. I think I'd rather just keep working and playing, and I'm happy with what's happening now. But really the options came down to, okay, like pursue a doctorate, get another master's, or do something like a performance diploma. And Rice University just made me a good offer for the master's degree, and that was more appealing to me than doing a performance diploma at the time. I was still interested in taking all the classes and doing everything that was required in a master's degree, and I'm glad I did it. It was the right thing to do. Okay, Michael Eldefson in New Zealand says, what would you say are some devices or things to pay attention to engage the audience while playing your piece, Sleight of an Evil Hand? I really like this piece. I'm really proud of this piece. I'm so happy with where it's gone and who's played it and everything, and I still play it on the road. I really like it. It's tricky because it's a long piece and it's a seemingly very repetitive piece. I think the trick to keeping the audience with you is to basically pace the activity. So I'm sure you've noticed the phrases do things like they wind up and then they unwind the same way, or they kind of do an arch form. They go A, B, C, and then they go C, B, A. If you can show that to the audience as best as possible, it's really helpful, and it keeps them from seeing the piece as just a series of neat stick tricks. So if you can really get into the drama of the piece and about the interactivity of the pendulum metronome doing one visual thing, and then the brushes doing this other visual thing to kind of appease the metronome and eventually manipulate it at the end, if you can really make that come across, then I think they'll stay with you the whole time. But otherwise, yeah, the piece could seem just long and repetitious. So for them to keep track of everything you're doing visually, it's real important, I think, to be still in the motions that aren't moving. So after the right hand does a stick flip, for example, it just does that stick flip, and then it goes back to being very still. So they really notice that stick flip as being the thing they were to pay attention to, and they identify it as thematic. They don't just identify it as like, oh, that was some temporary eye candy, but no, they identify it as like this thematic thing that reoccurs. So if all the motion around that visual is very subdued and more still, they'll notice it more and it'll pop out more. And if you do it the same way every time, they'll notice it as something important and as something thematic. So be still on the things that aren't active and really pace the drama all the way to the end as best you can, and try to show the form as best as possible. Will Marinelli in Ithaca wants to know what has been what has been the most unusual performance that I've ever taken part in. I thought about this for a long time, and I don't know, because sometimes something funny happens and that makes the performance really unusual, or something unexpected logistically happens and that makes it unusual, or there's just simply unusual pieces where the performers are asked to do something, theatrical, or the piece is really inventive or really, really different. But I guess what I would tell you is I thought PASIC 2011 I played, and it seemed really amazing that there were all these people and there were these real moments of silence. And I remember in my piece Metavita, which has these little LED lights, and you come off the snare drums from swirling, and there's the first big moment of silence in the piece, and I remember the light shining on everyone in the audience, and it was just completely silent, and I was just so happy to have the audience in that moment. So that's happened before, but maybe never on that big of a scale as PASIC. There were so many people. It was really neat to have that many people just like totally silent, and I was really proud of that moment. Okay, Dan McGee in Pennsylvania says, what is your mental process when you compose, and where do you get your ideas from? I can only speculate where the ideas come from. I assume they just come from what you absorb, what you're exposed to, what you read. I think there's this feeling inside most composers, just this itch that says compose. Composing feels good, composing is satisfying, and it's good creative expression. And more than anything, that's probably the engine, and it's that drive and that itch that makes you observe things that are inspirational, and that's kind of what drives you to pull ideas from wherever. And that's probably the biggest thing that makes it work. And getting the idea is real quick. Something I say a lot in my clinics about composition is that getting the idea, like the inspirational moment, it's very quick. I mean, it just takes seconds, and you hopefully jot the idea down, and then it's a lot of just hard work getting that down on paper and fleshing it out and coming up with the whole concept and the idea and how you're going to express it through your writing. And that refers to the other part of your question, which is what's the mental process. So it's usually like that. Something sounds really interesting to me, and I write down the short of it. And sometimes that's not anything musical at all. It's just a general idea. And then you kind of step back and try to get a big picture of how it's going to start and how it's going to end. And for me, I have to know the ending before the beginning. It makes no sense for me to start unless I know what it's going to do next. If I'm doing that, then I feel like I'm improvising, which is great, but it's not. I don't think it's the same as composing. So if I can finish, I can know how to start. So it kind of unfolds backwards. Okay, Jeff Lamb asks how to be creative, and I definitely don't know for sure, as I think this transcends music and even art. It really is a very broad human concept that's very tricky. And I even looked up creativity to get myself thinking, because I think depending on who you ask, they would define it very differently. One definition said it's just the act of creating something. Other one said it's the act of creating something unique and unusual. So I don't know. But one thing I would advise is just exposing yourself to lots of different things, lots of musical experiences, lots of different musics, study scores, also world experiences. I don't know, try to travel, try to take in, try to get lots of input, and try to go places as much as you can. Jeff, one creative exercise you could do, and assuming you're interested in composition, give yourself very strict restrictions. So say I'm going to write a snare drum piece, but I'm only allowed to use 2 coins, and I'm only allowed to use these 2 coins. And on one hand, you could do as many bells and whistles with those coins as you could. Like, you can spin the coin, you can flip the coin, you can throw the coin around the drum. So that's creative, because you're coming up with ideas of multiple usages of one thing. But another thing, say, okay, I'm only allowed to use the coins, and I'm not allowed to do any bells and whistles. I'm only allowed to tap with them. So you give yourself these strict restrictions, and then you find that you have to come up with all these creative things to get the task done. And it's not necessarily a fun exercise. It's going to hurt your head a little bit, but I think creativity, you have to kind of yank it out into something that it grows and develops. My creativity today is a lot different than it used to be. When I was young and when I think I was still, really training, it was rare that I would get these really cool ideas that I was excited about. And today they just come nonstop. And I have workbooks and notebooks full of these ideas that I'll probably never get to. So I just from that, I think that tells me it's something that develops slowly, and it's something that you get little by little, and actually it takes practice developing. Again, everyone, thanks for trying this experiment out with me. Hopefully it saves us some email and message strain in the future, and I don't know, I hope it turns out nice, and that we do it again eventually. So yeah, thanks again to all of you who asked questions, and I'll see you around the